get into the far hip ashi that is a little bit different than the traditional method, right? So the traditional method of going from a straight ashi to a far hip ashi is if put this knee down on that. So if I just come to like a standard straight Garami ashi, and now I reap over the top, and I come to the far hip in this fashion. The goal of a far hip ashi, it's very similar to a backside 50-50. The goal is to put pressure to the back of his knee, right? So I rotate down this way. Now there's pressure to the back of his knee, which forces his leg into this configuration, where it's very easy to expose his heel. If you look at the configuration of his leg here, it's identical to the configuration of his leg as if it were in a backside 50-50. The only difference is the way my body is configured around his leg. Okay, his leg is configured the same way. The goal in both of these variations of Ashi Garami, both the backside 50-50 and the far hip ashi, is to put pressure to the back of the knee and put it into this configuration where heel exposure can be easily attained. Okay, one of the issues, however, with going with far hip ashi from a standard ashi is like, this is super predictable, right? And what you find a lot of the time is when you do this and you go to make this transition to the outside heel hook, it's really easy for him to free his knee. You post on my ankle, post my ankle, you free his knee, and you lose everything. You don't get the outside heel hook, okay? What the goal here is I go here, we want to roll to an outside ashi, and here you get your break, okay? But again, it's pretty easy for him to block that if he can see it coming. He has things he can do to inhibit my movement, okay? So what we're going to do is a different method of getting to that far hip ashi, which is a little bit more deceptive and doesn't give him that same opportunity to defend, okay? We're going to start when he's standing, and then we're going to go down to when he's on a knee. So both of them, both variations of the movement we're going to look at originate from a de la Riva guard, okay? Where I have this hook, and this leg is tight to my shoulder. If it's out here, he's going to leg drag me pretty easily. Yeah, obviously not good. So you want to be here. Now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to sit up, and I'm going to push here to off balance him and grasp like so. Now we could go underneath for an underhook de la Riva to go into a K guard, but instead what we're going to do this time is I'm going to take my left arm and go deep, and now we have this Kaio Terra ankle lock, where this leg comes down and this arm goes forward to gain pressure on this ankle lock. One thing he can do to relieve that pressure is he can step forward with his left leg, and as he steps forward with the left leg, I hook behind it and I grasp at his ankle. Now I let this leg go above his knee, okay? So first it's below for the ankle lock, now it goes above, and I shoot this leg through, and I throw this leg over the top, and look, my legs are right there able to meet into the far hip ashi. Now I can catch the heel, and then we can roll into the outside ashi. Alright, so again, we start in a de la Riva. So however we get there, we're in a de la Riva. I sit forward, I push, you catch behind the knee with this hand. Now that gives me the opportunity to, as I'm falling back, catch this ankle lock, and I put pressure on him. I put pressure by bringing my knee down and my hips back. Okay, that creates ankle lock pressure, where he steps forward now, and I go behind his knee and his hamstring, pull forward, and we catch here. Now my left leg passes above the knee, and we off balance him back. And now my right leg comes over the top, and we come into this far hip ashi. Okay?
You just ruined the video. Like, congratulations.
When he's lower. So when I get to this de la Riva, instead of him standing, he comes low to that knee. Okay? So here it's hard to do the Kaio Terra lock. You don't really have the space for it. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leg, okay? I'm going to bring it, I'm going to hook to the inside. I'm going to turn, I'm going to let go of this hook, and I'm going to make a scoop grip on his right leg, okay? So the initial movement is here. I switch which leg is hooking. This leg comes over the top, and I make a scoop grip like so, into this deep half, like waiter guard sweep type position. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is, I can keep my left leg at the ankle like this, or I can pummel it through to here. They're both pretty good. I prefer this because here there is some potential threat of a rolling kimura, right? So here, that threat is mitigated. Now here what I do is I can off balance him, and he's either gonna fall down, and I'm gonna get the sweep, or as he goes to stop the sweep, he gives me a good angle to shoot my right leg through, and I reap over the top. This time I've got to go here, and now I can come out to the far hip ashi. We roll, and as we roll, we throw our legs to the outside to make the transition to the outside ashi to get our finish. So this time is, instead of him standing, he's on one knee and one leg. So we've got this daily hiva position. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from a daily hiva, I hook to the inside, I make a scoop grip, then come to this deep half weighted guard sweep position. Okay, now I off balance and back. He bases, and now as he comes back to avoid the sweep, I shoot my right leg through, and I reap over the top, cross on my legs into a triangle, and I have a far hip ashi. From here, I grasp the ankle, pull my leg out, or sorry, pull my arm out, now I catch the heel. Now as we roll, we go from this far hip ashi to the outside ashi to get our finish. Okay? Yeah, does that make sense, guys?
Okay, so now we're going to go through some actual match footage and break down the techniques that we've looked at. We're also going to touch upon the straight Ashi Garami cycle from Irimi Ashi to far hip Ashi to outside Ashi, and briefly touch upon the connection between heel hooks and knee bars. This is a topic that I'm very interested in, and which I'm going to cover at length in future videos, but it relates to this topic as well, so we're going to touch upon it in a briefer format. Okay, so anyway, this first match is Rousimar Palhares versus Rafael Lovato Jr. From ADCC. I forget what year. It's the one in Barcelona, Spain, so I guess that's 2009. So anyway, so you see here Palhares has a straight Irimi Ashi, or a single leg X, as some of you might call it. Here what he's doing is, we see this leg here, it's not on the inside. Okay, that's how you usually play like a straight standard Irimi Ashi. He takes it on the outside, because what he's going to do here is he's going to take his left leg, he's going to bring it over the top. See how it comes over the top in like a reap? He crosses his, well, he doesn't cross his legs. So usually you would cross your legs, but it's the same basic idea. He's now in a far hip Ashi Garami. Okay, the point of a far hip Ashi Garami is to bend the leg, just like a backside 50-50 does, and put it into this configuration, okay? This configuration of our opponent's leg is extremely easy to expose the heel of, and that's what the backside 50-50 and the far hip Ashi both do. They configure his leg in such a fashion that makes heel exposure extremely easy to attain, okay? He doesn't really have any strong defensive resources at his disposal here to hide the heel, okay? So you're almost always able to get it. He does have some defensive resources in the late stage defense, which we're gonna look at. But first, let's look at like how does it go perfectly, okay? So here, Palhares, he goes from standard Ashi to far hip Ashi, puts pressure to the back of the knee so he can expose the heel, and then they roll through to an outside Ashi, and now he gets the tap, or would have resulted in the break if there was no tap. Sometimes with him, there's a tap and a break, but here, he let go in time. Anyway, why is the outside Ashi better for breaking? Well, it's because it's an inside leg dominant variant of Ashi Garami. What that means is that the inside leg here is the dominant leg. As you see, both his legs are on the outside. The inside of Rousimar Palhares' inside thigh is able to press downwards at the top of Lovato's thigh, creating force acting in contrast to the force generated by the heel hook. Okay, that's what creates an actual break. It's that contrast of forces, okay? Whereas by contrast, if you look at far hip Ashi, the force of the Ashi Garami and the force of the heel hook, they're going in the same direction. So you could get, the guy here, the defensive end, could get broken if he like moved against the heel hook, but nobody really does that. It's pretty intuitive that what you got to do is you got to go with the force of the heel hook. But the strength of the far hip Ashi is that it exposes the heel very well, okay? Because of its ability to put pressure to the back of the knee and establish this configuration of the defensive man's leg. Now, Lovato rolls, and he goes to an outside Ashi, gets a tap. Now we're going to look at how can that go wrong, all right? How can the cycle from straight Ashi to far hip Ashi to outside Ashi go wrong? What offensive adjustments does Palhares make? And then we're going to look at, obviously, the technique that I demonstrated in this video. We're going to look at how can those sequences help us to perform this cycle with greater effectiveness than the standard method which Palhares is using here. Okay, so here Palhares has, again, that here's an outside Ashi, but it's still a straight Ashi. He goes from the foot on the hip here. Now he's going to take this foot, bring it over here. That creates the reaping action, which puts the leg in the configuration that we want. Now, one of the big weaknesses of the far hip Ashi is it doesn't have a strong ability to slow down the roll of our opponent as he rotates. So what we're going to see here is that David Branch is able to roll inside of the Ashi Garami to such an extent that now the angle for the outside heel hook is not correct. The knee's pointing, Palhares' hip is pointing directly into the front of David Branch's knee, and the pressure, which would be coming down from Palhares' right leg, is not coming down at the top of David Branch's thigh, which is what Palhares would need to get the heel hook break here. Additionally, you'll see David Branch has brought his hips down to the mat, which he's now going to be able to use to begin to escape in a lateral fashion, so just going like straight back. Whereas by contrast, you couldn't really do that, for instance, like here, right? You could, but it's harder because it's harder to, like, if I'm upright, for me to free my leg laterally would require me to like push on the hamstrings really hard. My hands aren't available. And in a more, even further upright situation, if I was standing, that would require me to literally jump out of the Ashi Garami. It's possible, but it's difficult to do. Whereas by contrast, once you bring your hips down to the mat in this sort of a situation, you've lost mobility, right? There's a mobility disadvantage, okay? But now you've got your hands and your secondary leg, which you can push to escape the situation, which David does here. Now, once you've succeeded in escaping this situation, remember, I've talked about this in other videos. The number one defensive reaction that leg locks produce is the man bringing his hips down to the mat. Now, David has done that here in order to gain the defensive resources that he needs to survive the situation. But because his hips are on the mat, there's a mobility disadvantage. Palhares, as we're going to see, doesn't capitalize upon that mobility disadvantage, but he could have hypothetically, okay? So let's look at how David Branch gets out of the situation. He pushes. He's showboating a little bit. Feels safe. And he's able to get his knee outside of Palhares' knee line, at which point he's totally safe. And now take a look at the action of his legs. There's a heist there, and that's what gets him back up, right? So his hips are on the mat, so there's a mobility disadvantage, but he gains some defensive resources, which makes the trade-off worth it. But now once he's out of the leg lock situation, there's no reason for him not to regain that mobility advantage. He brings his legs underneath him, he hip heists, he comes back on top, okay? Now, this is the second situation. We're going to see it goes right for Palhares in this situation. He gets the knee bar. Okay, so he's going for that heel hook. David rolls inside of the far hip Ashi, and then Palhares gets into the knee bar, and yeah, this time it's much tighter, and he gets the finish. Okay, the reason why he gets the finish here is two main reasons. First is he's higher on the leg. His knee line is deeper. Okay, you see it's like much deeper than it was in the last one. And this time, Branch, for whatever reason, instead of backstepping this leg over, which is what he would want to do to begin initiating those defenses he looked at previously, this time he falls the other way, and his leg is not really in a situation where it's great to start like pushing and escaping the knee bar situation. Okay, the pressure was probably too tight at that point, and like he didn't feel as if there's any chance to get out. Okay, so that's what went wrong there. Now here, we're going to see another situation where Palhares goes through that cycle, and instead of going to the outside Ashi for the heel hook, he switches to the knee bar. Okay, so we see a relationship between the heel hook and the knee bar. There's a dilemma between the pressure that's created from the heel hook and the knee bar. Palhares uses this very, very well. Straight Ashi. He reaps to get the heel exposure, and now he's rolling to the outside Ashi, but you see, this is not where he wants that leg. He wants it right here, pressing downward. But David Avalon rotates within the lock, and you see it's basically a knee bar here. And they're going to restart. Hilarious. Terrible. And he goes, you see Palhares goes right into the knee bar once again, and this is a very strong break. Okay? One more time. See how he's got the reap here, and he's got pressure to the back of the knee, which forces heel exposure. David does a good job of, he rotates very fast. So there's no heel hook anymore, but does not matter. He's still got a knee bar available to him. Now, if he wanted to get out of that knee bar, he'd have to rotate further, and then he'd be back in a heel hook situation. So you can see the dynamic that's being created here. Okay. Now we're going to turn to two matches which demonstrate the technique that I showed earlier in the YouTube video. Where the reason why I showed that outside heel hook stuff first is because that's obviously the goal of this sequence, and one of the reasons why Palhares is having to shift into the knee bar rather than being able to get the outside heel hook that he was looking for is that it's a fairly predictable sequence once you've seen it once or twice, and then you can, as soon as you feel the far hip Ashi there, you can start rotating and you can look to escape the situation. None of those guys were able to free their knee from their opponent's knee line, but they were able to turn it into a knee bar situation. Obviously, because Palhares is a very good knee bar, didn't really work out in the end, okay? But if it's possible, what we'd like to be able to do is get to the far hip ashi in a more surreptitious fashion, which allows us to cycle through to the outside ashi in a way that doesn't really give them the opportunity to begin defending and forcing us to switch to the knee bar. We'll switch to the knee bar if we have to, but what we'd like to be the case is that we go from far hip ashi to outside ashi to get to the heel hook. Now, if we have to go to the knee bar, we will, okay? But the initial sequence is our primary goal from the outset, okay? And these techniques, I think, give us an opportunity to get that going, right? So we see Jeremy Paul Skinner versus Frank Rosenthal at Grapple Fest in Liverpool. Jeremy Paul's going for a Kyotera ankle lock. And what we're going to see happens is the pressure from the ankle lock encourages Frank to bring his own hips down to the mat, and he's attempting to free his leg in a lateral fashion. Again, much easier when your hips are on the mat. This is very similar to the David Branch match against Palhares. Okay? So, but it's a sticky lock. Ankle locks are pretty sticky. It's hard to get out in that fashion. So what he does is he comes up. As soon as he comes up, there's space behind the back of his knee. Okay, in this case, it's going to be his right knee. Okay, we're going to see Jeremy Paul go through and over the top, and he capitalizes upon that space and goes right to a far hip ashi. Okay, in the fashion we looked at earlier in the video. Now, Frank is a teammate of mine, and he has, I can tell you firsthand, extremely good leg lock defense. So right away, what Frank does is he brings his own hips down to the mat. Again, he's the defensive reaction produced by the leg lock attack here is the man bringing his hips down to the mat. What Frank's doing in this situation, he recognizes that his heel will be exposed because of the massive amount of space behind the back of his knee. He reduces that space by bringing his hips back down to the mat, and he hides his heel at the same time. And ultimately what happened in this sequence, I cut it off right about here. What happens is that no one gets anyone, and they go back to neutral. You know, they're both very good leg lockers, and they both have very good leg lock defense. Okay, we'll look at that one more time. Kyle Terlock, Frank comes forward, he goes to the far hibashi, Frank defends by bringing his hips down to the mat. And now, to put pressure to the back of the man's knee here with a far hibashi when both of your hips are on the mat, it's pretty hard, unless the guy is an idiot and turns the wrong way. Frank is not, and he doesn't, so it doesn't work. Okay, but still a very good attack by Jeremy Paul, and something that I thought was very interesting. Now, this time we're going to see Gianni Grippo using the second variation of the technique that I demonstrated. Okay, this time using like a deep half waiter guard sweep against Cobrinha. He's going to take that leg, it comes over the top of the other leg, creating the far hibashi. Now, the big weakness of this version is that your arm is on the bottom, and you got to resituate it to the top to catch the heel. Very similar to the backside 50-50 gained from a K guard, but it's still a good attack. Now we're going to see here Cobrinha defending in a better fashion than any of those guys did before. All right, so some of those guys did a good job of rotating their knee within their opponent's knee line to force a shift into the knee bar. But as we saw, it's not really an amazing defense, because if the guy's got a good knee bar like Palhares, you're still going to get fucked up. Okay, what Cobrinha does here is he does a much better defense. Where what we're going to see is first he's driving in. I wouldn't really recommend that, but not sure why he's doing that, but you're going to see he does a really intelligent defensive response in a moment. Take a look at what he does with his left hand. So he's pushing first at the knee, and then it's his right hand. It pushes at this leg. Okay, now that's going to stop. It stops two things. It makes it hard for Gianni to switch to the knee bar. It also makes it hard for Gianni to cycle through to the outside ashi, because Cobrinha is going to backstep and he's out of the situation. It all started from posting on that leg. Okay, that's what none of those other guys did. They should have been posting on the leg. Look at that once more. Watch how he posts on the leg, and that inhibits his ability to halt Gianni Grippo's offense in both directions, towards the knee bar and towards the heel hook. Okay, if you look at, by contrast, for instance, a good one is this one right here. David Branch's right arm is on the mat, whereas I prefer his right hand to be right here, pushing. That would have enabled him to most likely free his knee from the knee line and then backstep out of the situation. As it is, he posted it on the mat. He's very off balance. It's a hard situation to do that perfectly. You know, granted, Palhares is much better at heel hooks than Gianni Grippo, right? So you got to give the guy some credit. So here, David Branch does succeed in rotating within the leg lock, but he can't free his knee line. Okay, so he got through one layer of the offense, but the second layer he wasn't able to get through, so he got put into the knee bar. Okay, so anyway, hope this was useful to you guys. If you guys are interested in this type of content, feel free to comment down below and let me know what sort of things you'd like to see me demonstrate in technique form and what sort of things you'd like to see me break down. This is a test of the audio, ensuring that it's working. That we don't have another disastrous situation at hand where I do 15 takes and none of them record.